everybody, from Creative University, and welcome to another session of Creative University. And for those of you, we have people from coming all over the place, but for those of you who are new for the first time here at Creative University, you can learn more about what we do at creative.media, which is creativ.media. And very quickly, and I do this every week, just really quickly let you know what it's all about. Creative U's mission, it's a pure industry give back to students, to exclusively for college and high school students who are interested in exploring careers in music, media, entertainment, and tech. And what we want to do is we want to bring great speakers and with diverse perspectives and roles in the overall business. And I'm thrilled today to have a true artist, and I'll be asking Ben to join us very soon. But it's really to give you access to great minds and also immediate internships and immediate mentorships to help you jump over that velvet rope and get into the business at particularly these crazy times. And so I'll talk more about that. And just before we get with Ben, our next session is going to be Tuesday, August 4th, with Jeff Clanigan, who's the president of Kevin Hart's Laugh Out Loud Network. Deeply seasoned, experienced veteran executive and great perspectives on the business. And then after that, Sarah Harden, who's the CEO of Reese Witherspoon's Hello Sunshine, is going to be joining us. And then we have Ann Lee, another great cause. She's the CEO and co-founder of Sean Penn's CORE, which is a community organized relief effort, doing great work during COVID, but well beyond that too. And then Elsie Crowley, who's really interesting company called Trioscope, and that's going to be coming up in a bit. But let's go back to our special guest today. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And Ben, I'm going to ask you to join. Excellent.
Hey.
Hey, Ben, how are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing well. Great to have you here. What a special treat. I'll get into the song and why you chose the song, because every week I try to choose a song that is either interesting or relevant to the guest in particular. But right. For those of you out there, I just want to let you know, and I was telling Ben this, I'll fanboy out a little bit. Ben's my favorite artist of the last decade. And yesterday, Ben, when we talked, I said 5 years, but last decade, more, and Spotify proves that. Amazing art, amazing music, and we'll talk about that today, but it's such a treat to have you with us today. And Ben, why did you choose the song Fearless by Pink Floyd?
Well, when we talked and we got to talking about Pink Floyd, that was what put the band in my head. And then just lyrically, it's, I think, pretty accurate to, if you're going to be a creative person, it's I'm a big believer in getting rid of fear. I think a lot of times, like in creative fields, the main reason that people don't attempt them is fear of failure. And everyone deals with that to some point, but I think a lot of times it's an unnecessary fear, and it's a misplaced fear, and people just don't try because of it. And so that song is all about kind of finding your own path, and don't be afraid of it. Just try what works for you.
Yeah, no, it was a wonderful selection, because yesterday I asked Ben which song, and it can be one of his songs or it could be any song. I opened it up and he sent me the song earlier today, and I thought, oh, that's perfect for the themes of today. And Ben is more than, for everybody out there, Ben is much more than a musician. He's a visual artist, and Ben beyond that too. And we'll talk about that a little bit. There are a lot of people who are going to be joining and we'll have questions. I received several of them in advance, but if you have questions for Ben throughout this session, feel free to use the chat function or the Q&A section function down below on your screens, and I will get to as many as I can. And Ben is going to be so good. He's going to be such a good guy that he agreed that he'd be happy to stay past the hour if you have questions. So with that, so Ben, let's talk a little bit, because the topic of what we're discussing today is creativity, the process of creativity. So yeah. I'm going to just open it up to you.
Okay. Well, I think one thing that I always can talk about from my perspective is I'm very proudly a DIY artist. It's something that started as necessity. I just grew up in a poor family in Florida, like just didn't have any way to do it otherwise. But it actually became quickly a choice. The first time I ever got to go to a real studio to try to record my own work, I hated it. I hated the clock. I hated that every decision I made was a potentially expensive failure. But I saved so much to go, and if I just had a bad singing day, well, you're out of money. You don't get to try again. And I hated it. Um, so I made a quick decision at the time. If I'm going to spend that much money, then why not just buy the microphone so that I can try it as many times as I want? I can fail 1,000 times for free. That is, once I kind of saw the comparison there, I realized I didn't know how to use a microphone. I'd have to learn. But it, to me, was just so much more appealing to be able to try it as much as I wanted. And that's become a general theme for me in all creative work. Um,
Yeah,
I was,
you talked a little bit about that when we spoke yesterday about how when you're trying something, experimenting, that tell us a little bit about the private nature of it, what you were just touching upon, and how that's important to from the beginnings of whatever creative work that you're working on to see it through and to develop it.
yeah, because, well, to me, I think to really experiment and really learn what you could do, you need two major things. And one of them is privacy, because when we're observed, we behave differently. If once someone's watching us, it's performative. And the problem with new things is we don't know if we can perform them, so we don't try. Um, and then the other one is it needs to be enjoyable, even if it doesn't work. Like it can't only be successes or you will quit. Because, like I would say for myself making things, um, there's always the joke about, kill your babies in the creative field. Everyone has a graveyard behind their house of just failed ideas. It happens all the time. And that can't be a scary proposition. You can't be worried about whether everything is going to work when you're first starting. Otherwise, you just won't do it. So for me, my two biggest rules when I'm going to try something new is I either need to be entirely alone or with someone who understands that I have no idea what I'm doing. They need to be okay with that. And then, yeah, the other part is just have fun with it. It shouldn't be like, you should not punish yourself if it doesn't work when you didn't even know what it was to begin with. Because most creative work is kind of flying blind until you find something you like.
But fun for you is not necessarily when you're talking about fun. Can you define that a little bit? Because fun is a complex thing, right?
Yeah. Actually, a better word for that is enjoy it. Because for myself, I write a lot of depressing music. I don't really write about happy topics, hardly ever. I don't know how. I actually don't know how people write happy music. That's weird to me. But uh, I very much enjoy getting ideas out of my head to see if I respond to them emotionally. That's what most creative work to me is, and why we sketch, why we demo, is just to realize that there's something in it that it moves me personally, and so maybe it'll move someone else. And I really enjoy that process, even when I'm writing about something pretty negative or pretty depressing. So I would say enjoyable is probably a better word than fun, but like it's really attaching to the process in a way that you're excited to do it.
So when you mentioned that you tend to write, in your words, depressing music, or
Yeah.
where does that? So I would call it beautiful, deep stories, confessional in some ways, if I may be so bold. So
Yeah.
where did that come from, Ben?
Uh, Honestly, for me, I think a lot of it became when I got that privacy and started to write my own things. I found that I really just wanted to get things off my chest that I didn't know how to talk about. I think oftentimes art is a great place for areas that we don't really have good language for. Uh, Music is kind of where language stops, I think, a lot of times. And you can put things into just arranging notes that have a feeling, and that gets across your idea. And so for me, I really think it was a lot of stuff that I didn't know how to talk about. I didn't have anyone to talk with. And so I would try to make a song or draw a picture, something to get it out of me. And uh, I've joked forever that it's just been my therapist from the beginning. Like I've just had this way of externalizing it and being able to observe it. So I think for me, there's always been a confessional nature, which is fine in private. I had to learn a hard lesson about touring. You then physically in a room, all those things that you got to exercise in private that felt real good, you get to think about them every night in front of strangers. That was a bit of a learning curve. I was like, at that point, I wished I wrote happier music because it was a bit to do. But I think oftentimes, like whenever we're in private, you start to really quickly realize what you would want to say, and it doesn't always have to be confessional. I know some people that you get them alone, and they instantly think of how to entertain people and how to make them feel as positive as possible. It's whatever comes out of you. But I think you need that private space to figure it out and to not be performing while you attempt it.
So yours is more confessional, as you indicated. And when you first, now you're, I'm not going to say you're comfortable with it, but you've been doing it for a while. So you release your stories into the world, and you sing them to a live audience, but you also share them broadly. How scary was it for the first few times that you did that, where you were bearing your soul essentially?
Uh, Honestly, at first, I couldn't quite do it, so I came up with a trick. And I found out that a lot of people do this. I felt a little better when I found out David Bowie did the same thing. He was a little too scared to sing from his own voice. He said he made up Ziggy Stardust because if he just sang as himself, he was afraid of being criticized. So he made up a character that let him be everything he needed to be. But that's just some other guy. It's not me. And so I did the same by writing stories that are half true. They're very much my own story in some way, but I would put it into a character, something not quite me. And that was a really easy way to tiptoe into being expressive. I don't think I directly wrote from my point of view until about 10 years of putting out records, even though there's true stories in there, but it was always about a character or an external me that I would never really think of as myself. So that helped me get over it. I've recently done some stuff that's very personal, and honestly, I'm already a little tired of it, and I'm going back to stories.
Interesting. Yeah, because your last album was quite personal.
Yeah, as direct as I've ever been, and I was glad to do it. And it was just because I finally actually got an actual therapist instead of just using music, and I was learning so much about just what that process was and what the mind was, and I didn't know what else to write about. That's all I was thinking about. So I did the first time something really directly about my own experiences, and yeah, I'm good on that. That I don't need to do that all the time.
Now you're moving on.
Moving on. Yeah.
Another beautiful album, though. And what you're with therapy and what we're talking about, so timely today too. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday, where the audience here is predominantly students.
Yeah.
And that's what Creative University is for. And I talked about some of the more concrete things about getting into the business and we want to have something that's completely different, that's a give back to help people who are passionate about it to break in, whether they're a creative force, They want to be in the business side, whatever. And we want to expose them to diversity of things. But we also want to inspire and provide support. And students are going through such challenging times right now as they're trying to navigate all the craziness around us. And so I'm curious to, like, what are your thoughts to some of the young people who are out there, first on the creative process and how to overcome the fear that you mentioned, and then we'll get into more just in general this moment in time.
Right. Okay. Well, I think some methods, and I think this applies to creative work, but I think it applies to anything. Oftentimes, I think we see end result and we don't see a path of how to get there, and we're completely intimidated by it. Everyone I know that's wanted to, say, learn an instrument or learn to paint or something, they'll say, I have no talent for it. And I'll tell you, most people don't. The people who have like a very natural instinct, that's really weird. There are such anomalies. You don't look at Mozart and say that's how everyone is. We still tell that story that he's a child prodigy because there's so few of them. And so I think a lot of times when we are going to get into something, we see end results and really complicated details, we get overwhelmed and we don't try. So I think, but this is true of even if you just wanted to be in the music industry, we just say, I have no idea how to get there. I don't see a path. So there's no way to start. Therefore, I won't even attempt. So I've noticed that for myself, and I still use this trick, I always simplify it back to exactly what it is in the smallest terms I can. So say with music, music is organized sound. That's it. You're taking sounds and you organize them in a way you like. And it could be sounds that come out of your body. You could play an instrument. You could arrange samples on a computer. You are just organizing sounds until you find it pleasing. That's the job. The way you do it, of course, there's a bunch of details. You could learn piano, you could, whatever seems the most inspiring to you. But I always reduce it back to that simple idea. I'm using sound to create a feeling. And that makes it not very intimidating. It also tells me I don't have to do it a certain way, and I don't have to worry too much about how I create the sound. Like a big thing for me is use what you have. So like with recording, there've been a lot of times that I don't have a drum set available, or I have a terrible neighbor who, if I make any noise, they'll call the police. I've had all those scenarios.
Do they know who they're living next to? Come on.
Well, they didn't like me either way. So, but you know, even songs I've had that did really well, I've had people tell me like, oh, why did you use hand claps? And I was like, because the drums were too loud and I couldn't play them. So I just was like, well, claps are quieter. I'll figure out how to use those. It's not always even like a giant aesthetic choice. A lot of instruments.
That's fascinating alone, because many of your songs, for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with Ben's songs under the name moniker Radical Face, hand claps are a big part of many of the songs, and that's very interesting just to hear why you made that decision.
Yeah, oftentimes it was just what I had. You know, I've had like someone's like, how did you come up with this idea of stomping? I was like, I just didn't have any drums. So I just stomped on the ground and put the mic there. That's just what I had available. Even some instruments I play, they weren't by choice. People think like I know how to play a banjo. The only reason I have a banjo is I found it in the garbage. I didn't say I want a banjo. I just, it was in the trash and it worked, so I used it. I have an accordion because it was in the high school closet and no one knew whose it was. So I just took it home.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to play it. I just made noises with it until I got something that sounded kind of neat. And I have zero training on any of this. I was just, well, music is sound, and if it makes a sound I like, I can record it and organize it. And so this kind of gets me over the fear of trying and saying, well, I've never been trained. No one's ever shown me how to use this. It's really just about finding what you think is pleasing. Yeah. And so in doing that, it also, I always say, just use what you have. If you only have like the mic on your phone, but you would like to try an idea, use your phone. Probably the biggest thing I would always tell people when they're getting into any kind of creative field is the worst thing to think about is whether it's professional. The best thing to think about is whether it's effective. Because if you make something effective that moves someone, no one cares how you made it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Again, it's that the theme there is not only being fearless and just starting and doing it privately, right? Because that's
Yeah.
one, and doing it privately so you're not self-conscious about the audience, but also experimenting and trying things, and you may radically surprise yourself. And one of the other things that you told me about yesterday when we were talking is that because you work in multimedia, you're a musician, but you're an artist. And one of the things you were telling me is that the process that you use, the creative process, is similar to all media. If you can take people through that a little bit. And by the way, everybody, I'm seeing your questions down below and we will get to them, I promise you.
Yeah. Well, so something that happened is music was my third choice. It is not what I started with. I didn't even start really making records at home until about 22. I originally wanted to be a writer. I wrote 2 books right when I finished high school, and it was my first computer. I never backed them up, and the computer crashed, and I lost both novels. So that was and before that, I thought I was going to be a visual artist, and I ran into some hurdles that made me say I could never do this for a job because I hate being told what to do with painting. If someone asks me to paint something, I just instantly don't want to. So I was like, well, this isn't a good job for me because I won't do it on commission. I'm very picky about it. So yeah, I moved to writing, and then that failed. And then the third thing I did was music. And something I noticed from going between the mediums is that all of them were the same as far as how they're structured and how you use your mind to do them. The details of each one are very particular, but this is the piece of advice that I got, and I got it from writing. It was someone that was helping me learn how to edit. And he gave me a piece of advice that saved me, and it helped me kind of connect all these dots. He basically said, details will never save a piece. He said, if you don't have a good idea to begin with, you're not going to detail your way out of it. So the reason that we sketch as an artist, the reason that we demo as a musician, the reason that we write skeletons or rough drafts as a writer is to see if there is something worth putting the energy into. So the whole point of that initial phase is to play. It is not to go in and commit to an idea. It is to just be as out of your own way as possible. Get any idea out. If you're going to sit down and write, never edit, just throw it out, get it out of you. The editing part of your brain is critical. The other part is creative. They fight each other. You can't do them at the same time. So if I go in to make a demo for a song and I have too many rules when I start, it never works. If I just go in and sit at the piano and play something until I feel something, and then I record that, I have a start. So what he kind of taught me though about the detail concept, it's been true of all of them, is that the first thing we're looking for is anything to give us motivation. If I can arrange some sounds that make me feel something, I'm going to be excited to work on it because it's a positive feeling. Mm-hmm. And if I throw out some ideas to write about and one of them just seems so cool to me, well, I have some motivation to go work on that idea. So that initial phase is just finding something that feels worth the energy. And
so
then
starting big idea, or blocking, I think you were saying in painting as an example, and then narrowing down from there, getting into more detail as you go.
Yes. And so that's where like the general structure is we try things just to see, do we care at all? That's your first question. And then once you do, you just look at your big picture. You don't do any detail work. Doing detail work first is actually what I believe writer's block is. I think writer's block is either you emotionally are disconnected from it, you've lost the feeling for it, or you have used details to hem yourself in and you have no idea how to connect it to anything else.
Yeah.
Stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes total sense. You know what's another really fascinating thing about what you were talking about, the role of serendipity in some of these things. So your first choice was a writer, but had you not lost those books because your computer crashed, you might be doing something entirely differently than your focus has been on your career.
Yes, totally different. I know.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Oh no, that thing I thought was such a loss at the time. I was heartbroken, and I know one day I'm going to write again. It's not lost, but it was one of those things where at the time it felt terrible, but I just kind of pivoted and found something else that was grabbing me. And I played instruments all through high school in bands, but I hated bands. I figured out that bands are there's nothing about it that's private, and it's actually competitive. Most bands, everyone's trying to be the most clever in the room, and that's not why I like art. I was like, I'm not here to prove I'm clever. I wanted to make something worth sharing, and everyone else in the band didn't feel that way. They just liked the image or something. So I just quit bands and went on to writing.
Well, that's interesting too, because that gets into the concept of that you were mentioning to me about being an artist versus an entertainer.
Oh yeah, this is one I think about a lot. And this is, again, a lot of times I just read and I find quotes that are inspiring, but it was the idea of the entertainer versus the artist is where your responsibility lies. Some people everything is for the idea of an audience. They want to create things so that an audience feels a certain way. I think the most direct form of this is comedy. A comedian has the most instant feedback of anyone who does anything. You either laugh or you don't. And if they don't laugh, you fail. It is very, you flop in front of everyone right away. And so what they do is 100%, they entertain people. They can get them to think through the entertainment, but their job there is to entertain you. And then as an artist, I think your responsibility actually lies more towards your ideas. Even if people aren't going to get them right away, even if it takes a little time to get used to them and things like that. And I think it's important when people get into these things, figure out which one is more important to you. Entertainer is not a dirty word. People almost act like if you're not saying I'm an artist, you're somehow cheap or failing. I don't think that's true at all. The people I know that are good entertainers, they are artists in their own right. The art of entertaining is so particular, and I couldn't do it. I've been around them and I'm like, I have none of those skills. Whatever you're doing is amazing. But they've also decided that I am here to make people feel a certain way in the moment. And I was saying, I like to just bury tons of little treasures in these details in case someone cares to go find them. But whether they find them is not that important to me.
That's also interesting. So for those, again, well, for everybody, Radical Face fans, so Ben fans, Radical Face fans, or if you don't know Ben's music, if you go to his website at Radical Face, then you'll see all of these things playing out. The fact that you're a visual artist, the fact that you're a writer, the fact that you're a musician, you just hunt around for these Easter eggs. You will find them. As I said, I've listened to your music more than anybody's by far, by the way. And when I visited your website the other day, for the first time, I saw your book about the family tree, right? You call it a guidebook, I think.
Yeah.
And so I really urge people to check that out to see how much of a writer and how much detail Ben puts into his storylines, because it's fascinating. So I want to get to a lot of questions, Ben, but I think this is really important too. One of the things we talked about yesterday, getting back into thinking about the students and just all the psychological, emotional issues that they're going through, that everybody goes through, but particularly now. As an artist, you were telling me about your concept of mental otherness and how it it permeates the way you approach your craft. Can you explain that a little bit to people?
Yeah. So I think the idea of otherness is it is the fact that all of us at times don't quite fit in. Some way that we all deal with otherness at different stages. Some people really naturally fold into social groups, and some it's rare. You know, they don't find their people very often. But no matter what, everyone is going to deal with it. And to me, one of the things in art is it's actually the embracing of the otherness instead of again being fearful of what that means. um, Something I always encourage if I'm ever producing someone is oftentimes people try to take the thing that is the most different about them and hide it. And in the art world, that is your actual currency. That is your value. The thing that I can only get from you because you're particular in that way is why I will listen to you. It's why I will come to you. It's not the thing that makes you like everyone else. And this is even true, I think, of how we perceive our friends and our loved ones. Um, like if I'm going to tell you about a friend of mine you've never met, I'm only going to mention the things that make him different. I'm going to say, oh, he can juggle fire or something strange about him to make him interesting. I'm not going to explain that like, oh, he's a totally average looking guy and he has nothing particular to say. That's not how we explain things with value. So I think a lot of times in art, it's about making peace with the thing that makes you different. Um, it's about making peace with your ideas that might be a little left of center, or it might be not quite what's popular right now, or whatever. And realizing that that's really the thing that gives you value. It is uh, it's what separates you and makes you particular. And the reason we like a certain movie, the reason we like a certain record, is it has a very specific feeling to it that we don't get from other records or other movies, and we keep repeating it. And so that otherness, I think, is not only should it not be feared, it should be embraced and then mined for all it's worth.
Is
Everything
that
makes you odd.
is that something that you've struggled with, or is it something you've overcome?
In some ways, yes. In other ways, no. I can be a little stubborn. Once I think an idea is good, I'm very hard to convince otherwise. I will fight for my ideas. Um, but that doesn't mean I don't get my feelings hurt about it. There have been times that I think I did something really good and there is zero interest. Like sometimes some of my favorite songs I've ever written are the least popular. No one really cares about them, but
Can
they
you give,
mean a lot to me.
can you give an example
Um,
of some of those songs?
yeah, sure. I mean, one that I did recently, I did it's like basically a cycle video, and it was a 3-song EP that I built, and it's called Sun, Moon, Eclipse, and it's built to be this loop, and I was really happy with it. And we put it out, and it was just, you know, a whoopee cushion sound, and then on for the next thing. Like, just no one cared. And but I still am very proud of it, like how the video works and how everything. I was, as a piece of art, I was very happy with it. And then even on records, sometimes my B-sides are some of my favorite songs, but I just couldn't find a place for them on an album. And like, you know, a personal achievement for me is a song called Night Clothes. Hardest song I've ever had to write. I will never play it live again. It's very personal, but I'm very proud of the result, even though I will never want to hear it again. Um, so, you know, those are very personal ideas, but
Yeah.
I think in general, dealing with that thing that makes you different and realizing that that is where you're going to find your ideas. It's basically it's a thing where I think you can embrace that part of yourself. And especially I think the privacy is necessary at first because it's intimidating. It's scary. When you put up ideas and, you know, I will say this, if you're going to do any creative art, you're going to express yourself in a personal way and someone's going to criticize it. Is what I was telling you yesterday. I think of it as if you're going to be the artist in the industry, the face of it, you are going to have your diary on display to everyone. Anyone can read my diary, and anyone can go online and say, this diary is terrible. And you have to be okay with that. And if you're not, but you still would love to be a part of the process, there's a million ways to facilitate. There's engineers, there's arrangers, there's plenty of people who work in music that have no interest in expressing all their fears for the public.
Right.
Don't feel like you have to do that, but if you would like to put out your own work, yeah, you're showing the world your diary.
Interesting. So, by the way, Suman Kong says, Night Clothes is my favorite song. Thanks for writing it.
Oh, well, see, maybe it wasn't popular, but the person it works for, it can work very much for. I found that to be true. Popularity is wide, not necessarily deep. It's a lot of people can enjoy it, but some of my things that I think are the deepest, it's not necessarily for everyone. It could be a little intense, or maybe people don't want to feel that way in general. So.
Well, again, I'm gonna fanboy out a little bit on this, because I love just the melodies and the lyrics. You are such a storyteller, and I go very deep. Like, I go deep. I like the soundtrack album that you created, which is really interesting. It's kind of mysterious.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to get into the questions. I want to get into one topic that I think is really important to discuss a little bit, which is this moment in time that we're in, and students find themselves in, where they may feel paralyzed. You may feel like, I'm supposed to be doing something. My path was set out to go through 4 years of college, graduate, get a job, do all that. And now the world has paused, and what do I do? Do I continue on? Is that right for everybody? Or if I'm not going that path, if I'm taking a leave of absence this semester or for the year, but I don't know what I'm going to do because jobs are hard to find, and all of these things, socializing is difficult.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about this moment in time and young people when they're facing this struggle within themselves?
Well, one, I hope everyone understands that it's difficult for everyone. Even people who are already established are like, this is screwing with my head. Like, this is not a thing you can plan for. And literally everyone is scrambling. So if you are also scrambling, don't feel like you're failing. Everyone has no idea what to do. We're putting it together. And like, you've done something great with the time, right? Isn't this how creativity started?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't think that this would have, had the world just continued chugging along, I don't think that this would have started, certainly at this moment in time. No question.
Right. And so I think the thing that, when I'm talking about that privacy, my favorite thing, and what I would suggest to anyone not sure how to deal with this time, is essentially the world has stopped. It doesn't mean life has stopped, but the way the world is interacting, everything was blocked and put to a stop. And I think the thing that I have most enjoyed about it for myself, once I got over the acceptance part, because at first you're always wondering, is this just a moment? Should I trust it? And now we realize, okay, this is a thing. We have to learn to live with this for a while. But I think the thing that it really affords you is the space to just try things and not be scrutinized about them. Like, if you can't quite just go back to school and go back to the path you thought you were on, you actually have space to just experiment. If there's anything you've had even a passing interest in, I would say now is the perfect time to try it. One thing that was told to me once that has very much helped me throughout my entire life is basically the data we collect not in motion is actually not that helpful. The data that we collect about ourselves in motion, when we start to do something, that is how you really learn how you feel about something. Our hypothetical mind is mostly wrong. So when we sit still and try to invent what will happen, we almost always get it wrong. But when we start doing motion, when we put the first mark on the page, like if you wanted to learn to dance, There's probably a YouTube teacher you could look at and you could try it. You might have said your whole life, oh, I would love to dance. And then you try it for a week and you're like, dancing sucks. I have no interest in this. But you only know when you take motion towards the thing.
Yeah.
And what this, to me, this affords us to take all kinds of motions, and you literally can't do anything else. Like we're not expected to go be a normal functioning part of society because it's not functioning. So the thing that has helped me the most in this time personally is I've gotten to stop all of my habits and all these things that I thought were necessary for me to survive as a musician. Well, all those stop too. So now I actually go to the drawing board. For the first time, I would say in about 15 years, am going into the studio with no agenda. I'm working on a record, and if I have ideas for the record, I work on it. But half the time, I now just set up microphones and make noise and see if I care about the noise. And it doesn't matter if I don't. I can go in there for 4 hours and come out and say, that's all garbage. But hey, I didn't have anywhere to be anyway. So I get to just experiment. So I would say to anyone stuck right now, try anything you have an interest in. And if you have zero interest, that's okay too. It's kind of a crazy time. But
Yeah.
if you have any interest, just try it. It's kind of a who cares moment. And if you can use that to take pressure off yourself and just say like, I don't know, I've never written a short story. I wonder what that's like. Try it. Just don't show anyone if you don't like it.
Yeah.
You know?
Nobody's gonna judge you about this time, but it sounds like the ideas again of experimentation, of just moving, trying to move. And the movement don't worry about moving in a big way, just moving in some kind of way. And don't worry. And then it gets the whole thing about overcoming the fear of being paralyzed through failure, and just do it privately. All the kinds of things you talked about, which are wonderful. Another comment from David said, when I first heard Night Clothes, I'm going to focus on Night Clothes again because you mentioned that. When I first heard Night Clothes, I cried so hard. It's an amazing yet underrated song. So
thank you. See, actually, even for me, I don't know who that reaches. I mean, I wrote that for my sister who passed away, and it was completely miserable to make. I needed to get it off my chest, but it's like that's a no-fly song. I will never play it again. If it's requested live, it's a hard no. But if you look at you have stats of everything now, by the way. You can put up songs online and it'll tell you exactly how often everything is listened to.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see in a way that I stopped looking. I actually don't want to be rated that way.
Yeah.
But I can look at it and see what does well.
But again, that to you, doing well in that sense, that's the mark of an entertainer, but that's not the mark of an artist.
Yes, and that's where I have my own measuring, which is what I felt like I got across what I was feeling is really accurately. There are other ones that did well, and I was even happy with it at the end, but honestly, it was not my intention. I went in with a very different idea and kind of failed my way into a new song. And it's not that I wasn't happy with what happened, but that wasn't my point. And so sometimes when you're really like applauded for something that was honestly a bit of a failure, you're like, oh, I'm glad people like it, but I still always know what my original intention was, and it wasn't that, and it's not as satisfying. So I have my own measure for things that I think I did really well, that I really got my point across. I understand if that point isn't always a feeling someone wants to have. Fair if you don't want to think about mortality of siblings all the time. Totally fair. I understand, but
okay. So now I'm going to get into some of the questions.
Okay.
Hunter asks, which one of you, well, you kind of answered this. Which one of your songs means the most to you personally, and why? Would you say Night Clothes is the one?
It's up there. I mean, I definitely have, there are ones that just hit a very personal, like for me, the last song on the end of the Family Tree records, That was not intended. I had a very different ending written. And through my own personal stuff, like my own family tree started entering the records because of just a long bad story. You can find an interview on NPR about it. But the last song on the record is the only time I've ever written about being kicked out as a teenager, when I came out to my parents. And I was about almost 15. And I never wrote about it. I just didn't want to touch the subject. And because of what was brought into light, I finally decided to write down how I felt about it. That's another no-fly song. Like, I was glad to get it off my chest, not touching it again. And so I have songs like that that are deeply personal, but and I'm glad to have written about it because I feel like I can move on. It's a nice way personally to feel like I can. And again, I think art is great for this. It's a good way to sometimes say what you need to say, and you don't have to think about it so much anymore. Like, I got it out. Anyone, you can listen to it if you want, but it's out.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's great. So Suman says, hello, first off, it's really cool to hear you speak. You've been a favorite musician for years and your songs have gotten me through some tough times. So, and then she asks, have you ever hit a barrier in transferring emotion to your work, if that makes any sense? How do you get through those moments where the output seems not quite what you imagine, lacking the meaning you wanted to imbue it with?
Oh, okay. Yeah, have I ever dealt with it? I deal with it every single time. That never goes away. I will tell you that difficulty of translating things you don't usually even have that great of language for into songs or paintings or short anything is always difficult. And no amount of repetition has made it not difficult. I'm hundreds of songs in and it's still hard. So don't feel bad if you're trying to do these things and you miss your mark. I miss my mark all the time. And that is everyone I know who writes a lot and even very successful songwriters for other people. They're like, I'm like maybe 1 in 20 successful. Most of them don't work. So don't feel bad. And then how I get over it is, one thing that's really helped me is just because you put something down does not mean you need to commit to it. I only commit to something when I can tell it's something that I would allow other people to see or hear. I will commit to it then. I can usually have a feeling like, actually, I would share this. But a lot of times when we're trying to get something across and we put a certain amount of effort onto the page or a certain amount of into the recording or the writing, we get committed to the work we did and be very comfortable with walking away, reapproaching, rewriting. I mean, I can tell you songs on records. I have, the one you're hearing is, I've re-recorded the entire song 10 times. I have songs like that because it just wasn't quite right. Everyone had a little piece that was right. And so I just put it down and started over.
Yeah.
And losing that fear of even starting over, every time you approach that same subject, you get sharper at it. So don't feel like because you didn't land it on take one that it wasn't good and you're a failure. Actually, just a lot of times I try to turn my mind towards, well, what did I like about this attempt? And I'll find the few things to keep, and then now I have a new starting point to try again. If I focus on all the things that didn't work, I will probably stop trying.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. A couple people, Milan, also, I cared about sun moon eclipse. It's one of my favorites. And then Martine says the same thing.
Oh, good.
And then,
no.
And Tucker says it was my most listened to song on Spotify the year it was released. Willow says, I remember when it came out, I was in class in high school and I stopped everything to go off and listen to it. So worth it. And then Felix says, I've noticed a recurring reference to the moon in your music. Does the moon have any personal significance to you?
Yes. So I grew up in a family that I'll paraphrase as saying very dysfunctional. I'm one of 10 children. And then I have nieces and nephews. I'd have to count. It's more than 20. So an enormous family, but kind of a weird mix of superstitious, religious. It's almost cult-like in a lot of ways. And so I grew up with this constant reference that there's things about the moon to learn from. And this was more me, I'd say, as a child. And a lot of acceptance for me as a metaphor is when I figured out it's a rock. It's just a rock in space with light reflecting off of it. And this is kind of my own detachment from more superstitious thought into just what is it? And I started doing my own research to things and finding out what they were, not what they're perceived to be. And so a lot of times the moon to me is the concept of reason. It's where I kind of associate the idea of finding my own sources, my own reason, not what I was told, but what I can put together as true. So the reason it shows up so much in songs is it's a common metaphor for me, still is.
Got it. Anam says, this is such a great session, hitting all the feels, emotions. Felix, one more question here, and then I'm going to go on to, there are a whole host of others. So I'll continue on, everybody. And Ben has been, like I said, he's good enough to, like, what a good guy. He's happy to stay over the hour. So we'll get to your questions. And Ben, you just got to tell me when you need to leave and get back to your creativity. So okay. Felix says, also, you mentioned earlier the otherness that makes people unique. What do you see as your otherness? Good question.
That is. So something that I will say is an initial otherness that I dealt with, it was an aesthetic one. So where I grew up and what was cool, like even musically, because I'm a bit older, and the music you listen to would be a big part of your identity, like at high school. If you're a rock and roll guy or you're a rap guy, whatever. And so I had all this private music that I knew would not float with the people I grew up around. Like, I was supposed to like certain bands, and I did, but I also really had a soft spot for bands like the Cranberries and things that weren't as cool.
I did too.
They're so good. But like, the thing is, I was uncomfortable. Like the first CD that I ever got was actually an Enya CD, and I still really like it. You're not supposed to like Enya.
I liked Enya.
I do. Caribbean Blue is a great song. I don't, but I had this stuff that was very private to me. And I noticed in my own listening habits, when I went to headphones or when I was in a space by myself, a lot of music I chose was more somber, less aggressive, and talked about beauty and built beauty. But that wasn't cool. Everyone I knew liked, super distorted guitars. Everything was as aggressive as possible. It was all punk rock and garage rock. And while I was a big fan of both, yeah, I think part of the otherness is I realized my listening habits alone were very different than my listening habits around friends. And so accepting that I liked that kind of music and wanted to incorporate it in what I make was part of a little bit of a leap. It's why I don't think I showed people a lot of my early recordings, is even though I'm a gay dude, I was just worried about being called a sissy. Mm-hmm. I had to accept that I just like that music. If you make me cry, I'm a fan. That is anything, any movie, any story. If you affect me emotionally, I love what you do.
By the way, I want to say one thing about that, because I was telling you yesterday that I was speaking with Roy Harper. Roy Harper, for probably very few of you people out there know this, but if you're Pink Floyd fans, you may know this. But in the great song "Have a Cigar" from the "Wish You Were Here" album, that was one of 2 songs by the Floyd that was not sung by the band, and most people don't know that. It was sung by a folk singer, acoustic singer, whose name was Roy Harper. And I had the good fortune of interviewing him just last week because I'm writing something about him. And he said the same thing. he knew when he hit the mark, because when a tear came to his eye. He said the exact same thing. And so I definitely see a symmetry with the two of you, by the way. And he's a great artist, a great artist. Okay, I'm gonna get to some more questions. Caden, I've listened to your Family Tree album so many times. They're amazing. I agree. Your music isn't like anything else. How did you develop such a unique sound, and who were your influences? You kind of touched upon this, but if you want anything more to add on that.
Sure. So there's always going to be, like, with the question of influences, something I realized is there's aesthetic influences to me, and then there are like conceptual and emotional influences to me. There are some things that I really influence me, but I have no desire to be like them at all. But they have something that sparks creative thought in me. So a big influence of mine, I'm a huge fan of Tom Waits. Tom Waits is a person that a lot of people can have trouble listening to, because I always describe his voice as sounding like a bag of rocks being dragged down a driveway. He has the most rough, destroyed voice you could almost imagine to be a singer. But as a writer, he's someone that, there's a song of his called Time, and he wrote in a single sentence a story. I pictured everything off of one line. And this was early on. It was actually the first time I realized my lyrics are just not good enough, and I threw them all away. And he wrote the line, "You said you'd stick around until the bandages came off." And I was like, I immediately see two people in an apartment. It's like a woman who wants to leave, but she cares enough to make sure you get back on your feet, but she's still going to leave. Like, I saw all this stuff off of a sentence. And I that's where I knew. I was like, I'm spending 10 sentences to still not get it across. And he did it in one. Go back to the drawing board. That's amazing to me. But I don't want to sound like Tom Waits. He's not a person that inspires me necessarily aesthetically, sometimes little bits, but so that's like what I would say, like almost more of a spiritual inspiration. I love what he's doing with his craft. And then there's aesthetic inspiration. There are things like that I just love the sound of. I don't care what they're saying. You know, it's that it can be things where it's like, I don't even really know the words to that record. I just love the way it feels. I've never really thought of the content. And so
what feels, okay, go ahead. But I wanted to ask you, what feels really good to you? Like, what's hitting you from another singer's right now in your life that's meaningful to you? But finish your thought. I didn't want to interrupt that.
Well, no, I mean, I would answer that all through time. Like, I would say, and of course, the strongest influences are usually where it hits both. Like, a very big influence on me that hit both was Neil Young. And when I heard Harvest, it was both the production of the record, the way he was using guitars, the lyrics. It just was like everything hit. And so that became a very important record to me. Same with Neutral Milk Hotel, Airplane Over the Sea. That's a record that when I heard it, I actually sold my electric guitar and bought an acoustic guitar as a teenager when I heard that album. It was that influential to me. So there are ones like that just hit every note at the time, but also influence is an ever-changing thing. Like, things that I was inspired by when I was 20 are very different than necessarily what I'm inspired by now. There are things now that I'm surprised I like so much, because my former self would have hated them. Like, I always find myself in this spots that I'm kind of surprised I like it so much.
Well, you have to give an example of that.
Well, actually, so this is a weird one. I'm a late in life Pink Floyd person. And, when I heard it as a teenager, it had nothing to do with the music. I didn't like the guy that listened to it all the time. The Pink Floyd guy at my school was so annoying to me that I didn't like Pink Floyd. I wrote off the band because of the guy. And I realized because I just had a negative association with the person. And then I heard songs later that I was like, this is amazing. Who is this? And be like, oh, Pink Floyd. And then I saw Live at Pompeii and I'm like, this is incredible. And I've been writing this band off for like 10 years because I didn't like that guy. And so you know, my former self was like, I don't like that band. And then, you know, late 20s, I was like totally blown away by something everyone else heard 10 years ago.
And now you're picking that band to start the session. That's
I
right.
actually, and I use them as a recording and mix reference. Like they've become a huge part of things for me. And I didn't like them when I was younger.
By the way, just another, it's just kind of funny how all these things weave in. You mentioned Tom Waits' Time as being so influential, and then Pink Floyd, Time is one of their most influential songs. It's all meant to be, Ben. This conversation is meant to be. Okay, so another question. How did you, well, let's see. Would you ever publish, Tucker asks, would you ever publish a novel in the future? You kind of mentioned this too, relating to family tree or not?
Well, the funny thing is the family tree was more going to be a novel that turned into a record. So I always wanted to write a family saga because two of my favorite books are East of Eden by Steinbeck and then 100 Years of Solitude by Marquez. And I really wanted to I wanted to write a multi-generational thing. And when I lost the taste for writing after losing a couple 100,000 words, the idea was to do it in record form. So that one is a bit of a hybrid for me. But I've been sketching out the idea for a book for about 7 years now. Not aggressively, but it's just a concept that I really like. And when I have ideas, I add to the notebook. And one day I'm going to write that book.
Well, if you, Tucker, if you and others, if you go to the Radical Face website, you'll see the great find, that Easter egg of the Family Tree Guidebook, which is actually very fleshed out. Because I ordered my copy of the actual book, but because it's not here yet, it takes several days. I printed it up and it's sitting literally right here, up here. And I showed my wife it the other day.
Really?
But it's actually a book. It's very much a book, and there's great detail in it and beautiful art. And I assume it's all your artwork too.
Yeah, most of it. I worked with someone to help me on I'm not the best with Photoshop. I'm more of an illustrator painter. So a lot of that one, I was more the idea. Some of it I made directly.
So Tucker, you should go check that out because I think you'll be kind of blown away by it.
There's some short stories in there. And but I actually have 4 short stories for that record series that I haven't published anywhere. And I started a newsletter, a monthly mailer, and I'm going to start putting some of the unfinished or unpublished work in that. So I have 4 more stories from the family tree that no one's ever read.
How do people get to your unpublished newsletter so they're able to sign up for that?
Right now, I've just shared the link in the bio on Instagram, and I wrote a blog post about it on my website, radicalface.com.
Okay.
And you can sign up for it there. And it's I'm putting a new original non-album song every month now because I have so much material from quarantine that I was like, I'm going to just start putting out a new song every month. And it also gives me my own thing where I wanted to be able to play. I wanted to be able to just write songs without the container of an album or the worry of, is this my new direction? I just wanted to make a song with no pressure of what the song needs to be. I can write about how I feel that day. And that's it.
Is that, okay, so you said that that's been kind of pouring out of you. The quarantine has given you that opportunity within yourself to do that.
Yes.
So there's another example of this opportunity we have right now to free ourselves in whatever it is, because creativity is not just music or art. It can be in taking any step forward to try something. It can be anything. It can be an internship or taking a step toward that internship or exploring a different kind of role in the media, music, entertainment business that you didn't even think of before.
Every person I have met who is successful in what they do, no matter the field, has been surprisingly creative in that direction. Like the people that I know that are good, even just, I have a friend who's a data person. He just does really large scale math, but he's intensely creative with how he thinks of it. and he's very good at it. And a lot of people would say math is a terribly uncreative thing. And actually, there's a great deal of interpretation in it. And it still takes a creative mind. I think the creative mind, it doesn't matter the field. If you're going to be successful in it, you're going to think about it and come up with ideas. You are going to create new ways to do it. So yeah, I think creative work, even if people have no intention of ever taking it past a hobby, I think it's a wonderful use of the brain. Like one of my biggest reasons I say, like, just learn to start sketching or play piano or anything, is that muscle you develop will show up in everything you do. Even if it's not your career choice, it's, I think, just a part of our brain that the more active it is, the more successful we are in any direction.
Yeah, look, I agree. I'm just chime in here a little bit because one of the themes throughout all the conversations I've had with all these great people with diverse, very diverse backgrounds within the business, go to the creative media website, go to the Creative University link on it, because you'll see all the other videos, the sessions, and the themes of experimentation, of expanding your mind, just trying things, is just a continuous one. And it's so important, I think. And especially now, if we're getting a little bit more on, even on the business side and on the artistic side, with technology transforming things so much, it it broadens our palette to try new things. And understanding the new technology is such a critical thing for young people. Most understand that, but a lot of people, let's say on the creative side, do not explore the business aspects of that world too, which is to be entrepreneurial is so important. Entrepreneurial means that really understanding as broad of a perspective as you can have about this business, which is the creative work, all the way to getting it to the consumer, to the fan, the engagement. Anyhow,
and the more you learn, even if it's not something that you're going to do, I think it's important to even try things to learn that you don't want to do it. I built a website once with code and I hated it. So I now know not to put my energy into building these websites unless it's like Squarespace where I can do it easy. Because it's not a good use of I have no desire, I get nothing out of it. It just sucks the life out of me. So that's a good thing to say, I need help here. But I didn't know until I tried it and I hated it. So I think
that's a great lesson to everybody, trying and exposing yourself to as many new opportunities. Okay, somebody asked, how and when do you get ideas? Can they come out at any time, or do you have to lure them out?
Both. So I actually think ideas are more a type of awareness than something that strikes you. So you can train yourself to pay attention to anything. And I think if you were working in a creative field, like if you would like to start drawing, you start training yourself to just look at the things in the world differently. You start seeing the world not as a tree, but also how the light hits the tree and how it plays against the background. Your mind will change because you've decided to kind of put energy towards that type of thinking. So I think a lot of it has to do with awareness. It's not something that usually comes and hits me. But what happens is, like when I started writing music, a big inspiration for me musically is not other music. It's oftentimes TV and film. I will see the way that sound interacts with an image, and that gets me to go sit at a piano as much or sometimes more than hearing a record I like. Because something about the visual plus the audio sparks something in me. I don't know why, but I still do it. I even do it with my own material. I'll sometimes just put up videos on YouTube that I think would be appropriate, and I'll play my demo underneath it. And I'll be like, yeah, that makes it more interesting to me. I like the visuals more with these kind of sounds. And that tells me I'm on a path. Like I use that all the time because it's what works for me. Well, and so I think it's an awareness more than anything.
Well, your music really I would describe it as somebody who's followed it so closely as cinematic in many respects. And like I said, you have that, I think you call it soundtracks, that one album. Is that the title of it?
It's called Missing Film.
Yeah, Missing Film. That's the one, and it's beautiful music.
Thank you. That actually, even that one, just by the way, that all came from I was working on an actual film and it wasn't working out, and I left the project. And I had all this instrumental music and I didn't know what to do with it. And so I was like, well, I still like it, so why not just give it to filmmakers? So it's royalty free. Any filmmaker can use it for free. Just go nuts.
That's very cool. And so you filmmakers out there, go nuts on it because
Yeah, please.
it's beautiful music, beautiful. Okay, what are some artists that you enjoy at the moment right now? Because you mentioned a couple others, but at this very moment.
Oh, like so, like just current music I'm
Yeah,
listening to.
I guess. Yeah.
Um,
Or find interesting.
oh, okay. I mean, because the thing is I tend to really remove myself from time. I have no idea when anything is made. But one that I heard recently that I liked is the girl Phoebe Bridgers. Um, and I just stumbled across a video that showed it up as a suggested YouTube clip, and I just listened to it and I was like, oh, I like this. And I checked out her records, and she's cool. I like her. She's a very good lyricist. She's someone that like can write about the mundane with weight, and I'm always impressed by that.
Elise just texted or chatted actually. Phoebe, yes.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, she's really good.
With multiple S's.
She's really got a lot of she again like hits it. She has cool aesthetic ideas. Her musical ideas are interesting, and then yeah, she can write about things that it'll almost sound like she's writing about the most mundane thing, and you'll be surprised it starts hitting you. She's impressive that way.
So I have another question from an anonymous attendee. Not a question, but as a multimedia artist trapped between mediums, your talk has been super helpful to me in thinking about how to structure my art practice from here on out. Your art is extremely inspiring to me, and I'd just like to say thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much. And I'll tell you, if you're doing multimedia, that thing about start broad and then detail, like go smaller and smaller and smaller until you're finished, applies to everything. It's always a sketch to the tiniest detail, and you stop rendering when you like it. But in the same way, a song, if I just stop when I think the song's effective, if it's all hitting and I have no parts of the song that I'm bored in, then the song's finished. So the details just get tighter as you go. And a lot of times, when trying to structure multimedia, I also always recommend do not make them all equal. Whichever media you're most excited about right now, make it your primary. And the other ones, if I have leftover. And so like I love to write, but I don't always have time or energy to write. So that's my third tier. I start with music. When music's frustrating, I paint. But I've made sure they're not all equally fighting for attention. And I'm allowed to put the third tier one on the back burner for a year if I need to. I always know I'll write eventually. But yeah, I will say if you work in multiple mediums, prioritize one. And then the others are for relief.
So Ben, you sound like the hardest working man in show business. I mean, you have all these things. Do you ever just sit on the couch and watch Netflix or? Like, I'm just curious, as a quick aside, what do you do for your downtime, or is your art your downtime? And so there's no separation.
Typically, so again, this helps me with the prioritize thing. If I have energy or ideas towards the music I'm making, takes 100% precedence. When I'm in a spot of like it's moving, I don't answer my phone. I don't look at email. I turn off all notifications. I'll put my phone on do not disturb and sometimes forget for a week. Because I've been working on an idea so much. And I don't feel guilty about it because that is what I consider my primary work and everything comes after it. But then as far as my actual downtime, even when I am watching Netflix, half the time I'm drawing things that are on the TV, I'll sketch them. I don't sit idle that well, but this is kind of, honestly, it's more just that I kind of get bored easy. I need to have, I'm not very good with passive entertainment. I can read easier than I can watch sometimes because it requires a little effort. Passive entertainment, my mind drifts. I don't know why. It has to be like a really good film or a very good show, and then I'll be engaged. But if it's even just 90%, I'll start thinking like, I wonder why they lit it this way. And I start thinking about weird stuff and stop paying attention. It's kind of a problem. So,
Gotcha. So Bo asks, what would you say the most effective method to attract fans has been throughout your career? Also, would love to hear your story behind the blow up. So the of Welcome Home Son, that song, like how it exploded.
okay.
Welcome Home is, for those of you who aren't deeply familiar with Ben's music, although most of you are who are on this, that Welcome Home is the most streamed song of yours and has been licensed probably more than any others. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. But
and wait, what was the initial part of the
so
question?
it was, what would you say the most effective method to attract fans has been throughout your career? And then also would love to hear your story behind the blow up of Welcome Home.
And this is not a passive aggressive answer to the first part, but I understand how this sounds. I think the best way to attract fans is to not think about attracting fans. Unless your job is to entertain people and you're trying to develop a specific audience to entertain, I think people come to work because work is genuine and they can trust the creator is being genuine with them. So whenever I am working on things, if I start imagining audience or I start imagining if this will do well, that's actually my personal definition of selling out. Selling out to me is not making money for what I do. Selling out to me is not going all the way with an idea because I'm afraid I will lose people. That's my personal definition of selling out. So I have found that while I may not work for everyone, the people I work for really like it. And I can promise you, I put a ton of thought and energy into it. I can't promise you'll like it. But as far as the building of fans, it has been, I can only do an autopsy of it. I cannot tell you that there was a plan, and every plan I tried to implement at different parts of my life failed. Anytime I thought that would work, it didn't.
Yeah.
And so then we get to why did Welcome Home do so well? It makes absolutely no sense. So I put out that record on a German label that I was very combative with. I have quotes from them saying, "You're the most difficult person I've ever met." I kind of take pride in that. But we really did not get along. He hated my artwork. The record Ghost, he did not like it. He immediately, basically, he had no interest in promoting it, and it was basically not promoted. It was put up online. It was by all means a failure. It sold nothing. No one liked it. Didn't get good reviews. There's nothing about it that said, this is going well. My other band, Electric President, at the time was doing a million times better. So I was just like, well, I guess my solo work is personal. And the whole way that Welcome Home happened, a life cycle of a record is considered about 6 months. When you put out an album, it has about 6 months to do something. If it doesn't do something in 6 months, no one ever revisits it. So for me to get a call almost 4 years later saying, hey, we would like to use the song Welcome Home in a Nikon commercial in Europe. And at the time, I really needed the money. I was just ecstatic to get paid. I was like, really? Off the record that no one liked? Yeah, sure, please. And from that point on, instantly, my very personal, almost diary entry project became my most popular. And I thought that the other bands I was doing, which are more energetic and what I thought more people would like, the table flipped instantly. And it was actually kind of difficult because once that song did well, everyone asked me to tour. I had no intention of ever playing that music live. Some of the songs on the records I was making had over 100 tracks. How am I going to do that with 3 people? I had no idea.
Mhm.
And I was scrambling to try to figure out how to make a career out of the thing I thought was the dead end. And it was weird. The first tours were awkward. I had no idea what I was doing. It was like, I don't know how to play any of this. I don't know what I'm doing. But, we just tried to have fun with it and eventually figured it out. But there was none of this makes any sense. That's not how it should work.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it goes back to the thing about how I think you actually get fans. I think if you make work that is really genuine and you do 100% of what you can do with what you have at the time, and it is all there in the work, that's how you can remove the work from trends and remove it from time. Because, I'm a huge fan of Nick Drake. He's a very big influence on me. No one cared about him, and his life as a musician was considered a failure on paper, and he died at 27. Everything about it, he tried to tour, he quit halfway through his first tour and never went back, and made a couple records and overdosed trying to stop being an alcoholic. And I found him because of a Volkswagen commercial, put Pink Moon on it, and I was like, what is this? And that's how I found Nick Drake. And he's been a huge influence ever since. He's very much a Van Gogh. Like, his life was not a glorious one. No one liked it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here we are. I have him on a pedestal, what people would have called a failure. So I think when you put all of that effort into the work you're making and make sure that it is everything it could be, it doesn't matter when people find it. Because I've gotten better at recording since my first record, but that doesn't mean people are going to like my new stuff more. It just means I've gotten technically more proficient. But that's not why people listen to music. That's not why people look at art. Otherwise, we'd only have realism painters. Whoever can paint the most realistic wins. But we still go look at Basquiat and are moved by it. And it's not the most rendered thing by a country mile. So yeah, I think when it comes to the idea of building fans, I think your job is to make it available. Where it goes is actually out of your control. And if you believe you can control it, you're actually just going to hurt yourself in the process. And everything that's ever happened for me, like getting a manager, she found me. I did not ask. That Nikon spot, I had no idea what was going on. They just asked. And
by the way, everybody out there, so Ben's manager is Rachel Craig, who's a wonderful, wonderful person. And she's really not only smart and just a good person, but she's very innovative. At least it seems that way to me, very innovative. And she was featured last week talking about her journey in the music business and music industry and how she met Ben too, and so touched upon that. But it's a great session, and you can find the video at the Creative University website. And I think for anybody interested in music, and there are a lot of you because nobody's left, and I'm going to let you go very soon because it's almost an hour and a half, and I feel guilty a little bit. But you're teaching me to stop feeling guilty, so that's a good thing.
Don't feel guilty. If you're, what is it? The time you enjoy wasting is not wasted time.
Yeah, and this to me is just amazing. And I'm going to have a selfish question for you too. But so Hunter asks, and we'll leave this maybe to the end. But she asked, can you play us a riff you have been writing on a guitar, or play a little quick something for the fans? So like a sneak peekish kind of thing, if you can do that. But I want to just a few other comments. Jeremiah says, Ben, I love your music. Do you ever fear? Well, hold on before I get to that question. Caden says, your songs, Always Gold, Secrets, and We're on Our Way have had such an impact on my life. I've listened to them hundreds of times. Caden, I bet I've listened to them more. I remember one especially bad day. I went for a long walk just listening to your albums, and they really helped me through the toughest times.
Thank you. I often write for my own tough times, so it's always nice to know it works on the other side. I always like that.
Let's see. We talked about that a little bit. I have to, unfortunately, I can't get to all of them. Who are, Martine asked, who are your favorite visual artists?
Oh, wow. Okay, so that can be a very long topic, but I'll be short. Some visual artists that really get me, and if you the monthly mailing thing I'm putting out is not just about me. I'm going to be sharing painters and video workers and stuff that I love every month. It's going to be more what I am inspired by than what I'm making. So you'll get a lot from that. But all-time favorites, I mentioned Basquiat because he's a favorite. And then I love a lot of illustrators. I'm a huge fan of Edward Gorey. He, I think, is kind of proto Tim Burton. I think everything Tim Burton figured out came from Edward Gorey. Shel Silverstein, the children's author, huge influence on me. And then as far as
I can definitely see that in your artwork.
yeah, because he can be so bleak, but somehow it's charming. Like I love that. And then I mean, it goes all over. I love Francis Bacon because he's horrifying. I mean, like my taste in art's pretty broad. So, but I'm going to be writing about that specifically because I love visual art, and visual art actually gives me a lot of ideas for music, more than sometimes music. Like sometimes something a way of painting feels is something I want to see if I could arrange notes to get that idea across, like just how it struck me. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of painting in general.
Okay, two more questions, and then if you would be willing to give a riff or a sneak or something that you're working on, that would be wonderful. If you're open to that. So somebody asks, anonymous, do you have any tips on how to become comfortable in your own skin?
Well, this is part of what the private thing is I think a lot of that it is impossible to know, in my opinion, exactly how you feel while being observed. I think the observer changes the whole equation. So for me to get comfortable in my skin, I first had to be comfortable myself with no audience. So that's where I think the private part is so necessary. The next part is the next phase, be very careful who you first share things with. Not all opinions are equal. And I would really stress, especially if you're going to do creative stuff, the first people that you get opinions from, you need to be 100% clear of their motivation. And if they are trying to change you or sway you, that's not the person you want to talk to. You want to talk with someone that you can be really open about what you're trying to do, and they can be very open about whether they're getting that feeling too. That's all I look for. My initial circle of people I show work to, like that I'm building or unsure of, are 3 people. They're the only people who ever hear something that I'm not sure of. And it's because I know the feedback they give me is for me and not for them to just push their opinions on someone. But you have to be sure of that. I think that inner circle is really important. And then slowly you get to general public. You have no control over that. That's a paper airplane you throw out the window and it goes where it goes. But before you launch it and before you show people you don't know, start with yourself in a small inner circle that you can really openly talk to.
And that advice really applies to everything. You know, so getting comfortable in your own skin is that really everything you just said applies to more than art, and it's just the human condition really, and authenticity. And it gets back to what you mentioned about being comfortable with your mental otherness, and right, it all ties in together with that. Okay, so one more question, and then if you're willing to do the riff, and I'm riff, I have to ask, because from your first album, which I think that German record executive is an idiot. He's an idiot because you have so many brilliant albums, but I mean, all of them are, for those of us who, they're all great. And again, I'm sorry that I'm fawning so much, but whatever. I don't care. Life is short. Get comfortable in your otherness. That's my otherness. That's okay. But
actually, I don't, on that topic, we should never be ashamed to be a fan of something.
yeah,
this idea that like you're somehow less, I was like, why? It's so fun to love stuff.
oh,
Like,
I love stuff. I just don't, I guess my wife sometimes, no, she's very supportive, but I'm really out there. Like I wear my feelings on my sleeve, and I'm interviewing you. And so I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable situation. But I'm very comfortable with loving the music. I'm no problem with that. So my favorite song, probably the most impactful song that for me is The Mute. And it just, I don't know why. There's so many, but I don't know why. So I'm curious really quickly, because I don't want you to, it's already an hour and a half, but can you just tell me a little bit about the seed from which that came?
yeah. So The Mute initially started because 3 of my nieces and nephew, or a niece and 2 nephews in my family have autism. And one of them is nonverbal. And the initial seed for the song was just being around him and wondering, I have no idea what is in his head. We know that autism is not necessarily about IQ or an intelligence thing. It's just a communication thing predominantly. So he could have any depth of emotional life, and I have no idea. And so what started was just writing the story of how do you express yourself when you can't do the one that we all associate as being the most human, which is talking. And then so it just started as a story, and then it kind of turned into really so it goes a little bit to a documentary I saw on autism, and this is from being with him. But there's a woman in her 40s, nonverbal, and she rocks in place. It's all the very strong autism signs, and she eventually learned to type, and her emotional life was incredibly complicated. Her parents were horrified because they've been talking in front of her whole life like she doesn't understand them. And she was writing things like, I know my rocking is very strange to you, but it's how I comfort myself. And I wish I could tell you that, but I haven't been able to before now. And they were both moved and horrified. Like this whole time, there's been all this going on and we didn't know. And I think it's not, there's muteness of just like literally physically can't do it. But there are a lot of people that just don't feel like they can speak up at times. And it does not mean that they don't have an incredibly rich, complicated internal life. And so this all stemmed from that. Like, just because they can't tell you doesn't mean it's not there. And that was a song I actually crafted over a couple of years because I couldn't quite figure out how to say it. I knew I wanted a simple folk structure, but the words were slow because I didn't want to be flippant.
Yeah.
Like this is kind of a touchy topic for me. So I was like, I want to make sure I'm being respectful of the topic. And so, yeah, it was a pretty slow process. I started that song before the Roots and wrote the words slowly over about 3 years.
Yeah. It's the lyrics are amazing and the melody is amazing and haunting. And the video, you can find it on YouTube, and the video for itself, which you probably directed it, is, I urge you all to watch it. To me, I wondered if there was a double entendre there, though, just about some of the things you mentioned in your life. And I'm not going to go unless you want to touch upon that, but the, leaving home and all of that. And so that's, I don't need, unless you're open to going there, but that's what it always felt like to me, that there was a misunderstanding or not understanding or acceptance. I mean, that's kind of what it is about. But
yeah.
And so that was deeply personal in multiple ways, I would imagine.
Yeah, that was the thing about, for me, I didn't I spent a few years knowing I was gay, but not knowing how to talk about it. And then I did, and it went horribly. And then I didn't say a word again for 11 years after that. Like I just wouldn't talk about it until I was about 26. And so I spent a long time knowing something and I just can't communicate it. And so, yeah, it was definitely personal as well, because it was something I was trying to figure out in private and it wasn't working. And then, eventually it gets insidious. You start wondering if all of your relationships are real. You start saying, like, yeah, you're nice to me, but would you be if you knew? And it infects everything. I suddenly just didn't trust anyone I knew. It was just getting worse and worse. So, I did it a second time. Second time went much better. But no, I think that's just kind of a common topic. And that's something I look for in writing all the time. And I actually recommend this to people doing creative work. If you have a personal experience you want to write about and you would like to be as honest as possible, one trick is just take all the details away. Remove the names, remove the places, remove the specificity of it. But the human condition is universal. It's why we can read Don Quixote and identify. This is a very old book, but we still see those same struggles. It's because it's just the human condition. So if you take out your specific details, you can write about anything. And I guarantee you, someone out there has dealt with it too. And so you'll connect just on the core issue. But when you get into very specific names and very specific places, the more details you add, the more people have trouble projecting themselves into it. So if you have something you want to get off your chest, just don't name names.
Yeah. Listen, I appreciate that just personally to understand a little bit more about that really special song. So, and for everybody out there, we've touched upon it many times. And so this is so perfect timing too, because of the themes in your work and the struggles that everybody goes through, the universality of it. And at the risk of sounding cliche, you're not alone and you're not alone. Like if you're lying in bed one day and you can't get out of bed because of all the crap that's going on out there, it's understandable that you can't.
Everyone, I think lots of people are having trouble getting out of bed. I think this initial thing, this thing of realizing all the things that I used to think were so specific to me and no one's going to get it. When I finally found how to talk about it and how many people just nodded in a very knowing understanding, I was like, I had my own private hell about this for so long.
Yeah.
Found out there was no need. And so the only thing that I really hope to share with those things is it's not just you. A lot of people, it's just kind of being a person. And even those ones that on the surface you think just have it all together, I promise you they don't. No one knows what they're doing.
Nobody knows what they're doing. That's a great theme. That is so true. And that's why just try something, because nobody knows what they're doing. And there's no one formula for it. And Ben's life is such a living testament to that. He thought he was going to be a novelist, and his books blew up in his computer that led him on this path. And that path might have been an amazing path in a different way. That's okay. We can all have myriad paths. By the way, Jeremiah says, I'm lying in bed right now. And then Tucker says, oh, same here. It's okay, guys. It's fine to lie in bed. And
totally cool. I have days where it's Groundhog's Day. Sometimes and I'm like, I haven't even put on shorts. I don't know what's going on. And it's okay. Everyone's dealing with it. And I think actually the quicker we accept things, the faster we can move back to things that we enjoy. So I've noticed when I am having a bad day, I don't try to convince myself I'm not anymore. I just go, oh, today sucks. I'm going to do things I like to do when my day sucks. And I just try to go to the easiest things to do. But don't stress over it. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if it happens 10 days in a row. That's actually my favorite thing right now is it's kind of a free pass to feel how you feel.
That's a great way to end it. It's a great way. I love that quote. Do you mind picking up the guitar, whatever instrument you want? No instruction, anything that you'd like to end the session with for everybody.
Yeah, I could tell you, let me grab a guitar. Okay. I have an electric next to me that won't make a sound. One second.
Okay. Yeah. So Ben, while you're doing that, I'm just going to thank you profusely for giving all this time, because you gave me a good half hour yesterday and more than an hour and a half today, and what a treat it is. And I'm going to make this available to everybody once we edit it. We'll make it available. Again, for those of you out there who haven't checked it out, I really urge you to check out Creative University, because the people who are coming are incredible in their own individual ways. And it's exclusively for you guys, for the students, for all those reasons. And it's just a give back. That's what all it is. So go to creatv.media. So it's kind of spelled funny, creative.media, because I thought I was being so creative in coming up with that. So that's my creativity. So Ben, take it away and we'll end the session with this.
And I'll show you, I'm not a riff writer. I call it trance writing. I look for things that I can just play over and over, and I lose myself in them. That's usually how I start a song. I don't even look for melody or anything like that. So if I can just do it repeatedly, it means I found a mood I like, and then I'll live in that mood all the time, and I'll write a bunch of ideas for it. So an example is I've been trying to find something that feels mysterious. So the one that I've been working on is, I just found 2 chords that I can go back and forth, and I'll do it in front of the TV sometimes for like 10 minutes and I just don't get bored of it. So I know it'll be a song. I don't know what song yet. This is all I have, is these 2 chords, but it's. And I was just doing this for like 10 minutes the other day and not getting bored of going back and forth between them. And that's more how I write. I do details later. I'll come up with specific melodies later, but I just kind of float around, and I find I do best on guitar when I don't think about playing guitar. So you asked about like what I do with passive time.
Yeah.
I'll just put on sometimes a movie that I've already seen, and I'll just watch the movie and I'll just try to think about it as little as possible, be as lucid as possible. And then when something pulls me out of watching to the guitar, I found something. And if I can keep playing it over and over and I like it, I record it into my phone. So that's great. A writing tip for me.
Well, listen, Ben, thank you. Thank you for everything. And
thank you for having me. It's flattering. I'm not used to just saying a bunch of ideas about creative process to people. So it's cool. And I really like what you're doing. The idea of just putting something back. I really believe in like put back more than you take. I think that's a nice idea of being a human. As I say, my grand calculus, when my time on this planet's finished, I want to have left more than I consumed. And so at some point too, just collecting honestly gets boring. Mm-hmm. You want to share.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. And thank you. So Ben, keep doing what you do. It's amazing. All the different things that you do. Everybody go to the Radical Face website to learn more and see the latest and sign up for the new newsletter that's going to be coming out that talks about all kinds of art and releasing individual songs, it sounds like, on an ongoing basis too.
Yeah, at least one. Some of them I'm going to have as many as 3 that I've just been writing a ton. So
thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Really, I appreciate it.
Really great to have you, Ben. See ya.
Take care, Peter.